consistent, and I'm going with our definition of human rights. And the reason why I'm doing that is so no one can say, oh, look at the Muslim. He wants to have his cake and eat it. I'm not defining human rights. I'm allowing you to. And Islam doesn't contradict any of what you said. Islam grants religious freedom. It grants religious tolerance. It grants you liberty. It grants you life, private property. It grants you charity. All of these things. Now, I'm holding you to consistency. In the start, when I asked you, what is human rights? You defined human rights as coming from God, your God. What does your God say about apostasy, Tony? What does your God say about apostasy? In Deuteronomy chapter 13, from verses 6 to 18, your Bible commands the Israelites to kill apostates. Will you or will you not admit that that contradicts basic human rights? Coming up here and saying, oh, well, that's the Old Testament, doesn't respond. That means back then, that law contradicted human rights. And I quoted you the New Testament, which says the Old Testament is good. Furthermore, Tony, I can play your own game. I can quote you the top Christian scholarship that says you should go to war, you should kill bad people. I can quote you for them and play your own scholarship game.
Okay,
so
Sammy.
I'm not being inconsistent.
Sammy.
I'm just holding you to a standard. And now
Sammy.
what about...
Sammy, okay, thank you. We are at 5 minutes, and now we will start our clock for Reverend Tony Costa. Tony, you have 5 minutes, and you can start right now.
Thank you. You will notice in my opening statements, I made the following points. Human rights are those that we hold dear, like freedom of religion, the right of free exercise of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. These are enshrined in Western democratic governmental constitutions like the U.S. Bill of Rights, the Canadian Charter of Rights, and the UN Declaration of Human Rights. I pointed out that Islam denies all of these. I pointed out, first of all, that Islam discriminates against other religions. The fact that Jews and Christians are considered dhimmis. Now, Sami says, well, look, Muhammad did a constitution with the Jews when he was in Medina, but what he doesn't tell you is the fact that these people were dhimmis. That is, they're subjugated and subdued people. They're conquered people, and under those circumstances, they are subjugated under Sharia law. We know that Muhammad had commanded the expulsion of all Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. This is a fact that is confirmed within the Hadithic literature. The Caliph Omar, when he invaded Syria, he made a pact with the Christians that they were not supposed to build any new churches. They were not supposed to build any monasteries. They were not supposed to repair any broken churches. Does that sound like religious freedom to you? Saudi Arabia today will not allow churches to be built on their soil. There's no synagogues allowed. No temples are allowed. You cannot even bring a Bible into Saudi Arabia. Christians cannot even gather to worship on Saudi Arabian soil. Why is this the case? Because of Sharia law. Now, I think what Sami is presenting with us here today is a sanitized version of Islam. He is not telling us what the classical schools of Islam have always interpreted to be the case with Sharia law. There is no religious freedom. Apostasy is still very much alive and well today. Now, if you look at the Hadith literature, we have a voluminous work here in Bukhari and in Muslim. It is very clear that those who left Islam were put to death. And so I am not saying anything new that the schools of Islam historically have not said. They have been consistent in this area. The issue of inequality, I didn't get a chance to mention this in my opening statement, but the fact that we are told that a Muslim cannot be sentenced to death for murdering a non-believer. He can be put to death if he kills or murders a fellow Muslim, but not a Muslim but not a non-Muslim or a non-believer. Why is this the case? Well, Surah 98 verse 6 says that the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, and the idolaters, they are the worst of created beings. Why? Because they're not believers in Allah and in His messenger. This is a violation of the basic human rights of freedom of expression. I don't have to agree with Muhammad. I don't have to agree with Islam. But yet the Quran says that I am the worst of created beings because I don't believe in Muhammad or in his God Allah. But in Surah 98 and verse 7, it says that Muslims, the believers, are the best of created beings. In fact, the Quran says that you are the best of all peoples. And if you refuse to follow Allah, then He will choose another people. Surah 5 that Sami had referred to about Muhammad being sent as a warner. Of course, he was sent as a warner, but certainly, Sami, that doesn't mean that you ignore the rest of Surah 5 or the rest of the Quran. Surah 5, verse 51 says, "Do not make friends with the Jews or the Christians, for they are only friends one to another." There is no freedom of speech or expression. Why is it that Pakistan today, in its constitution, has a blasphemy law? Section 295-C, which says that if anyone denigrates Muhammad or says anything insulting about the Prophet, he should be jailed or put to death. We have seen the reaction around the world when the Danish cartoons of Muhammad were posted. Why is there such a reaction? Because there is no freedom of expression. You cannot freely say whatever you want. But yet Christians don't act that way. Christ Jesus is always maligned consistently in our media, in the news. And yet Christians do not call for the death of these people or these artists or these producers. There is also the issue of slavery. And what Sami is not mentioning is the fact that slavery still goes on today in the Islamic world. Slavery is permitted. And we also have the issue of women's rights, the fact that a man could beat his wife if he suspects infidelity from her in Surah 4 and verse 34. Even Aisha herself, the youngest wife of the Prophet, said, "I have not seen any woman suffering as much as the believing woman." And so the fact that women's rights are not respected, that the majority of people in hell are women, and that women are deficient in their knowledge and in their religion, as Muhammad said, all of this cries out loud that Islam is incompatible with human rights, and that's why democracy is incompatible with Islamic rule and government.
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen. We have gotten through the portion now where each of you have made your opening statements, your final statements. We've gone through the crossfire, and we do have callers on the line, so without wasting too much more time here, we thank you for doing this, and we do want to take our first caller. I believe the name is Radical. Can you talk to us? Radical, are you there?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
What's
your question? Who is your question directed to? Who's your question directed to?
My question is directed to Sami.
Okay.
You mentioned on killing the apostates. This is from the Reliance on the Traveler. This is a de facto book on Sharia law. From Book O, Section 1.2, the following are not subject to retaliation. A Muslim for killing a non-Muslim. A Jewish or Christian subject of the Islamic State for killing an apostate. It explains, because a subject of the state is under its protection.
What is your question?
An apostate from Islam is without consequences. Killing an apostate is without consequences.
Sir.
This is Sharia law, Sam.
My
question to you is, do you agree with this or not?
Did you get that, Sami?
So again, basically, the fallacy of simply appealing to authority. I have a question to you. Instead of giving me an Islamic jurisprudence book, why don't you deal with what the Prophet Muhammad himself did from Sahih Bukhari? When a man came to him, made the pledge of allegiance to Islam, he left Islam the next day and the Prophet Muhammad didn't kill him. That comes above anything of what a scholar says. In fact, scholars say that the second most reliable and authoritative book after the Quran is the Hadiths and the Sunnah, the example of the Prophet Muhammad. And here he is, he didn't kill an apostate. So what's your response to that? That trumps any scholar you bring for me. And that's my response. You have to respond to that hadith, not me having to respond to what some scholars said, because even the Quran even says, if you have a dispute, take it back to God or the Prophet Muhammad. I'm taking it back to the Prophet who didn't kill the apostate when he left Islam. So you have to deal with that.
Tony, Reverend Tony, would you like to respond to that answer, please?
Yes, I'm going to respond by quoting Sahih Bukhari, volume 9 and number 58. The Prophet then sent Mu'adh bin Jabal after him, and when Mu'adh reached him, he spread out a cushion for him and requested him to get down and sit on the cushion. Behold, there was a fettered man beside Abu Musa. Mu'adh asked, "Who is this man?" Abu Musa said he was a Jew and became a Muslim and then reverted back to Judaism. Then Abu Musa requested Mu'adh to sit down, but Mu'adh said, "I will not sit down till he has been killed." This is the judgment of Allah and his apostle for such cases, and repeated it thrice. Then Abu Musa ordered that the man be killed, and he was killed. Abu Musa added, then we discussed the night prayers, and one of us said, I pray and sleep, and I hope that Allah will reward me for my sleep as well as for my prayers. Now, it's very clear in this hadith that here you have a man who was a Jew, who became a Muslim, who reverted back to Judaism, and what is the judgment? He is put to death. Why is he put to death? Because as I had quoted earlier in the hadith, Muhammad said, if anyone leaves his religion, kill him. And so what we find here in this hadith is consistent with what we have read elsewhere in the hadith. The punishment for the apostate is death. And that has been acknowledged, again, by all the schools of Islam throughout history. And so the onus is on Sami as really a lone voice in the wilderness to try to oppose this incredible mountain of scholarly evidence that is set against him.
Okay, we've got another caller on the line. Thank you, gentlemen. And we'll just let all our callers know that we want a specific question and make it quick, if you could. So we have Yusuf on the line. Yusuf, are you ready with your question?
Hello?
Yes, are you ready with your question?
Yes, the question in the book to that guy, the Muslim guy, in the book of Kanz al-Ummal, Muhammad, F-U-C-K, the female of God. Then F-U-C-K, the female of pig.
Okay.
Then F-U-C-K.
Yusuf, what is your question?
I'll tell you. This is the question. Then, in fact, mother of Ali bin Abi Talib, she was dead. Did that job of a prophet to fuck animal and dead women? If you did not come give me an answer, I'll give you another question.
Okay, Sami, would you like to respond?
First of all, why don't you watch your tongue? I mean, this guy's saying the F word in front of an entire audience, and he's talking rubbish. Someone who talks with a dirty mouth like that doesn't even deserve a response. This is a civilized, proper debate, not street trash from the road.
We're going to caution our audience to please not make those types of words. This is the kind of program we don't want to hear that. So absolutely right. I agree with you. Well, would you like to respond, or would you like to move on?
He wasn't talking about anything meaningful.
Okay. We have another caller, and we can take that caller right now if we have a minute. And his name is Sultan, calling from Sweden. Are you there? Are you there with us?
Me?
Hello?
Yes, I'm in here.
Okay. What is who is your question directed to, sir?
Yes, I want to ask Tony. Do you hear me, Tony? Hello? Yes,
Tony, can you hear the caller?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Tony, the brother have been asked you, and you ignored him. His question when he told you, bring from the Quran the application of the verses. You ignore him. I don't respond to him when he say this is verse to Medina, this is verse to Mecca, this is verse to Mecca, this is from Medina. You ignore the verse with brother he asked you for. Another thing, what shall we do to the Old Testament? Shall we take it away from the Bible? The Old Testament, shall we kick it and cut it? My friend, and which Bible shall I follow? The Catholic Bible, Protestant Bible?
One question.
Orthodox
One
Bible?
question. Let's address one question. Tony, are you ready to do that?
Yes, I am. Let me just quickly say, when he says, should I follow the Protestant, the Catholic Bible, this shows an ignorance of biblical translations. I mean, this is like me saying, should I follow Yusuf Ali's translation? Should I follow Pickthall? Should I follow Sale or Dawood? Which translation? That's a meaningless question.
Tony, you know what I'm going to do?
Yes.
Tony, but I'm sorry to interrupt. Really sorry. We're going to take a break, so hold that thought. Caller, stay with us. We're going to be right back. We have about a 2-minute break, and then we have the final segment of our program. So stay with us on break night. It's getting good. So stay with us, and we'll be right back after this break.